Today I'm sharing 10 tips for working in pen pastels and colored pencil. My first tip is choose the right paper for the project. My favorite is the Luxe Archival sanded paper. The pastels stick to it so well. Now there are other sanded papers out there, but none of them are archival on the front and the back. The other sanded papers, the back is testing as being acidic, which is not good long-term for the artwork. So the Luxe Archival is the only one that I use. And just for transparency, this specific pack of Luxe Archival was provided to me by Brush and Pencil to test out, but I have since gotten much more of it because I absolutely love this paper. But it's great because the pastels stick to it really well. I don't find that I make as much of a mess with this as even other sanded papers. I'm not sure what magical sauce they used on this, but my gosh, the pan pastels stick and blend so well to it. Tip number 2, Spectrafix. This stuff is amazing. Get the Spectrafix and then get a fine mist sprayer to put it in. This is going to keep you from having heavy droplets. The Spectrafix won't darken the pastels like many other fixatives I've tried do. The only time I've had it darken anything is when I put it on way too heavily. But if you apply this in very light layers and let it dry in between, I don't find any darkening of my colors, but it really helps those pastels to stick to the paper better, both while I'm working, so as a part of my layering process, and just long term, the work really stays put well. So Spectrafix and a fine mist sprayer is tip number 2. Tip number 3 is all about choosing the size of paper that you want to work on. How big should your project be? A couple of things to keep in mind. Obviously, being a smaller piece is going to be much faster to complete. The downside of that is that it's going to be harder for you to get small detail. So you want to balance out how much time do you want to put into it. If you like tiny detail, work a bit larger. A 16 by 20 inch would have allowed more space for really small detail within, let's say, the flowers on this piece had great detail in the reference photo, and I would have been able to capture that easier if that was something that I was looking for on a larger piece. But working smaller, you are going to get things done faster. The other thing you want to keep in mind, are you using a standard size? If you are going to be framing and matting this, if you do an odd size, let's say something that's long and thin versus, let's say, an 11 by 14 or an 8 by 10, which is what this one is, a 16 by 20, something that is a standard size, it is very easy to find a ready-made frame and a ready-made mat. If you get into unusual sizes, you're typically now going into having to do custom framing, which can be very expensive. So if you are going to frame the artwork yourself, you may want to go with one of the more standard sizes. Another thing to keep in mind is if you are going to make larger prints, I would recommend to have your artwork be a bit larger. This is an 8 by 10. I will not make prints any larger than an 8 by 10. Artwork doesn't look good when you try to make it larger, or larger than the original. Even if you have a really high resolution camera, that doesn't fix the fact that the detail just isn't there in the original. So let's say I knew I wanted a 16 by 20 inch print. I need to make my artwork 16 by 20 or close to it so that it'll look better in print. It always looks better if your artwork is larger. You can make the print smaller and it looks amazing, but doing the reverse doesn't generally look so good. For tip number 4, we have soft tools. This is what you're seeing me in the project apply the pan pastels with and blend out. Now you're going to want several. I like multiple shapes. I've got some that are flats. We've got the triangles like you see here, and I want several of each because if I'm blending an area that has more magenta and a separate area with green, or in that case brown, I've got 2 different brushes so I'm not making a muddy mess when in between colors. I'm not having to constantly change the sponges out. So having multiples of these is handy. Also, get a lot of extra sponges. These are not things that you're just going to keep cleaning and reusing. They start to fall apart fairly quickly. They are disposable. Now, when I say that you don't really clean them, I just mean you're not going to use soap and water and wash them. It kind of works. I don't think it's worth the trouble. It takes a lot of time and they do, like I said, fall apart. One of the things that I do is I use an old t-shirt or a paper towel and I will very lightly wipe off color. If it starts to pick up too much pastel in between different shades, then I may go ahead and wipe that sponge off and try to reuse that. The other thing you can see me using right there, that is a mop brush. And I very, very lightly went over some of the areas that were blended out with the pan pastels. Now, I don't like blending out the areas very much where I've used colored pencil because it knocks too much of the pencil off the paper. But with the pan pastels, I can lightly go over it. It knocks some of the pan pastels off too when you use a mop brush, but it can soften the look just enough to give you that really soft out of focus background. But don't push hard, and I don't depend on that one nearly as much as I do the soft tools. And I played around with using different paintbrushes to apply the pan pastel. I never had great results, was never a huge fan of that. I definitely get the best results with the soft tools for applying the color. And even when I blend with a mop brush, it's just to soften out what's already there. I say blend, but blend's not really the right term. When I'm blending and mixing color, that's all being done with the soft tools themselves. And with the soft tools, you do not have to push very hard with those either. If you're pushing really hard with those, you're going to damage them very quickly. You will burn holes right through those little pads. So you can keep a very light hand. You can see as I'm moving this around here, I am not touching or barely really touching the soft tool to the paper. It does not take much pressure to get great results. Before I move on to my next tip, if you are watching this thinking, I would really like to follow along in real time and slowed down portions of this video, then Patreon is going to be something you want to check out. For as little as $4 a month, you get access to all of my longer tutorials. I've been doing this for over 7 years, so you instantly get 7 years of content for $4. Like, that's crazy. There are over 300 videos, because the video screen is lying to you right now. There are over 300 available as soon as you sign up in multiple mediums. Head over to patreon.com/Lachri to sign up, or if you just want to get more information and see what rewards are available in addition to all of those videos, head over to Lachri.com. The link is in the video description. Back to our tips. Tip number 5 is blending color. This is really easy to do with the pan pastels. They're very similar to paint in how we're able to blend and mix colors. Now, I do this in 2 ways. My first method drives some people crazy. You can see my pan pastels are an absolute mess. I need to wipe those out. But one way is I just take my soft tool and I mix it right in the pan. There, I've mixed my magenta and my white, and I've got a lighter pink color. It can get messy, but it's not really caused any issues for me in my work. I just wipe it out if it starts to get too dirty. So here you can see, mix some blue and some magenta, and I'm getting a more purple tone. I mean, I already have purple, but you can see how this mixes very much like paint would. The other way that I like to blend and mix my paint, or my pastels I should say, is to take some of the color and I will mix that onto a scratch piece of paper. This is just mixed media paper that I'm using. So I've taken some phthalo blue, we'll take a little phthalo green, which is going to give us a nice teal type color. Whoops, grabbed some ultramarine, I didn't mean to, so back to the phthalo blue. But we'll just mix some of that together until I get the color that I like, and then I'm able to take that color and go onto my artwork once I've mixed a color that is appropriate for whatever I'm working on. You can even lighten that up, take a bit of white. Now, just for transparency, this set of pan pastels, it's the same set that pan pastels themselves sent me years ago. I've not needed to replace any of these colors. So I did not buy this set myself. They did provide me with it, but I haven't had to replace any colors, and I didn't really feel the need to add additional to that. This is the set of 20, and I'm able to mix anything I need from here. Now, here's a big color tip for you. Don't try to use every color available to you. You want to use a limited color palette. If you are finding choosing the right color to be a bit of a challenge for you, you're having a hard time deciding what colors to use less colors. You can see there, I've got 3 greens, 2 yellows. Pick 1 green, pick 1 yellow, pick 1 blue, pick one of the oranges. Don't try to use them all if color is something that you are finding challenging. So just learn to mix from less colors. You're going to learn more about mixing, and it's more likely that you're going to find that harmony in your own finished painting because you used fewer colors and you used colors that mixed together to create other new colors. That new color you just mixed obviously is going to go with the previous colors because it was made from those colors. Less colors, it's going to be so helpful for you in learning to blend and mix. My next tip for you is on using colored pencils. So you can see I'm doing a base with everything with the pan pastels. My colored pencils are going to blend so well over this. Whether I'm using soft tools or even my pinky, I'll sometimes blend a little bit with that. But the colored pencils are going to allow me to get super fine detail. Now you may think, why not just use regular pastels? For me, regular pastels, they feel too chalky. The feel of them weirds me out. I just can't deal with it. I don't get that with colored pencil, but the colored pencil looks nearly the same. Now, the colored pencil that you use will make a difference. I am mainly using my polychromos on this. Polychromos, they have a higher oil content. They just blend beautifully over the pan pastels. I can use my pinky just to soften that out. If I use a higher wax content pencil like Caran d'Ache Luminance or even Prismacolor, well, not that I use Prismacolor, but any of those pencils with a higher wax content, they're not going to blend out as soft. I want to save my higher wax content pencils for final details that I don't want to smudge out. But you'll notice as I work through this, almost everything I'm using are my polychromos so that they blend really soft. But the polychromos are going to allow me to come back over the pan pastels and get those really tiny details that I am just not going to easily achieve with the pan pastels alone. Tip number 7, we're going to talk about contrast. Now, if you look at my butterfly, you look at the flowers, they're all the same color as my background. So it'd be very easy for the subjects to be lost in that. So how do I make them stand out? One is just in having more detail, sharper, cleaner detail on the subjects themselves. But the bigger thing is in creating contrast. If my subject is light, if I darken what's right next to it or right behind it, that will push the subject forward. Or the reverse, say my subject is darker, I can make my background a bit lighter and that will separate the subject better from the background. Even though I'm using the same pencils, the same colors of my pan pastels, just creating more contrast in my value is what's going to help me to separate my subject from that background more. And when you get into this tiny little detail in here in the flowers, you may start to lose your place. It feels overwhelming. Break it up and just focus on one little area at a time. Don't worry, you're not looking at the entire cluster of flowers. It is just too overwhelming and it just doesn't usually come out that great. So work on one small square inch at a time before you move on to the next. And always look at this in terms of abstract shapes, especially with flowers. When I'm sitting up close, none of that looks like a flower to me at all. It gets a little bit confusing. So instead, I'm looking at my reference photo and just picking out the abstract shapes. Okay, this curves to the left here and it's got a weird little lump on the side. I'm looking at it like that. I'm not looking at it as, okay, now I'm going to draw this perfect flower petal. My brain just doesn't wrap around it that way. Look at the weird shapes and copy what you see in your reference photo to get a more accurate finished result that is not so overwhelming, because trust me, it will be discouraging if you're sitting there trying to make the flowers. You're thinking, I'm drawing a perfect flower. It won't look like a flower as you're working on it. So don't let that discourage you. Tip number 8 is about the color itself. If you look at the background, well, you can't really see it here, but in the background, I had some reddish brown tones, and you might be thinking, okay, how do I mix that perfect brown tone? Instead of jumping straight to the red, see if you can mix it from the other colors in the background, because generally that color is being created by the colors next to it. So in my case, I had greens in my background and I had magentas, and they were overlapping into each other, and that's what created the perfect brown that worked for this piece. So it's kind of, I guess this tip kind of wraps up into a previous one where we were talking about mixing from fewer colors. When you do that, that end result is going to have a more natural feel with everything else. So like that upper right or left-hand corner there, it's kind of, well, in this it looks a little bit too pink, but in the finished painting, that has a brownish kind of muted tone. And I achieved that by mixing the greens that were already in the background with the pinks and the magentas. And so now I ended up with this more muted color that worked perfectly with everything else. If I tried to mix that first with just brown, there's no way I'm going to come up with the perfect brown. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's going to be very difficult to come up with the perfect brown that is just incomplete harmony with the rest of the piece. By mixing the two colors that I already had in that background, that is often what's going to get you that weird color that you're having a hard time figuring out what it is or how to mix it. It's just for mixing the colors that are on either side of it. So tip 8 was really part of tip 5, which means I owe you a bonus tip at the end. Tip number 9, tape your work down to a drawing board. This way it's not sliding all over the place as you work, and if you're going with archival products like I am here with the Luxe archival paper, I want to use a acid-free, a pH neutral masking tape. I don't want to ruin my archival materials by using tape that may leave, like painter's tape, that can leave residue on the artwork that over the years could start to yellow it and cause damage. So using an acid-free masking tape is best, but making sure that that paper is taped down, it's going to help keep me from having the paper slide around and damaging the edges. It just keeps everything nice and flat as I work without fighting with the paper sliding every which direction. Tip number 10, glassine. That is the stuff you see under my hand right there. It looks kind of like tracing paper. Use this under your hand so that you can rest your hand on the artwork without smudging it or getting the oils from your skin all over the work. Now, you may think, well, can I just use a scratch piece of paper? That is better than nothing, but regular paper can pick up some of the pastel or pencil and smudge the work itself as you're sliding it around and moving it. The glassine won't. Nothing will stick to the glassine. The other really cool thing about glassine is it is archival. It is pH neutral. This is something that you can use to wrap your artwork in. So when I ship a painting, I will usually wrap it in glassine before I put bubble wrap and other things that are not archival over it. It protects the work. And I have this storage box that it's kind of like a photo storage box that I keep a lot of my paper work, whether it be watercolor, Inktense, colored pencil. A lot of those are stored in there. And I will put a piece of glassine in between each piece so that nothing is smudging onto another work. I don't have charcoal getting on this piece or anything like that. It keeps everything nice and clean. But that way I'm able to comfortably rest my hand as I work so I can get steadier lines without smudging anything. Now here comes back to one of the earlier tips about contrast. What I'm doing at this point is darkening up the areas around the butterfly. I'm letting that stand out. It pushes the butterfly forward. The background was too similar in color, I felt, to the wings themselves. So by going over this, I'm able to make those wings stand out. As always, I sign my work before I'm even finished. Now, the last thing that I did, I came back through. I thought I was completely done with this piece, and I stepped away from it for a day, and I just felt it needed a little bit more. And because I came at it with fresh eyes, I was able to see, and I'm going to show you this as a final bonus tip, what I did in Photoshop to figure out what it needed. I wanted to go ahead and get a more soft neutral tone on the wings, more of like an olive green, yellowy, warmer tone. I had a little bit more with the cooler greens, the bluish greens in my piece, and I really wanted those yellow tones in there. So that was something I was able to see in Photoshop. And again, I'm going to show you that in just a moment. The other thing is that I wanted to darken some of the areas on the wing and the background. I also wanted to come back through with a bokeh effect right behind the butterfly there, the pink and kind of brownish tones here I'm working on. I wanted to make those a bit smaller. So this was something I just didn't notice as I was working initially. I'd sat in front of the work for too many hours straight. So when I came back at it with fresh eyes the next day, I was able to see so many little changes that I was able to make that I think really improved the overall piece. Or if nothing else, it got me closer to the look I was going for. I really wanted that warmer feel. Coming through here with some touch-up texture and titanium white mixture from brushandpencil.com and painting on my brightest white highlights. So you may be thinking, oh, is that like acrylic paint? No, acrylic paint is not archival over colored pencil. Colored pencil is a wax and oil-based product. Acrylic paint or a gel pen, that is all water-based. If you put a water-based product on top of the wax and oil, it's not going to stick long term. That is not archival. So this product is made specifically for colored pencil, and I'm able to get these really, really nice bright highlights that are also very crisp, very clean, thin lines with those. There is my finished painting. Now I want to show you how I came up with, I need to go back and do some work on this because I really wasn't sure. I mean, I really did think it was done until I pulled it into Photoshop and was able to see some changes I wanted to make. So this is my bonus tip. When you hit a point where you're just not in love with the piece you've done, try putting the reference photo along with your artwork in Photoshop. Now that doesn't mean that I was trying to copy everything in my reference photo exact. I don't really care about that. I just wanted to make a pretty painting. The thing was, I felt I didn't capture the look that I really wanted. So I needed to pinpoint, well then what exactly is different about mine from that reference photo? And besides the fact that I did the detailing different on the flowers and the butterfly, and that was fine, I did that on purpose. My biggest thing that I think was sitting wrong with me is that my colors were more of that blue-green. This is what I was just talking about a moment ago. Look at the reference photo on the left, how you've got more of the olive greens, the more yellowy tones, and mine had the more bluish tones. So that was what I decided I was going to go back and change. Now, does that mean it's wrong because my colors weren't exact? No, not at all. It was pretty with the bluish tones, but it also wasn't what I wanted. I really liked that yellowy tone. So that's why I decided to spend another couple of hours. I went back the next night and made some adjustments. So the main adjustments I made were on the color. I also softened down some areas on the wing and the background and a little bit on the bouquet look. But it didn't take me very long to make those adjustments. I just wasn't seeing it on my own. Like I said, I had sat in front of this for so long. You start to sort of lose sight of it. What I needed was to take a break, come back with fresh eyes, and looking at it on a small screen in Photoshop really helped me to be able to pinpoint little areas I wanted to change. And you don't have to do that in Photoshop. You can just take a photo of your work and look at it on the smaller screen on your phone, and you may notice things that just little things you want to change to improve on that work even more. But it's always a good idea when you think your work is finished, come back, look at it with fresh eyes or on a smaller screen and see if there are any adjustments, something standing out too much or not enough. Like in my case, that wing wasn't standing out enough because I needed to darken the area just behind it, and I was able to fix it from that. So there's your bonus tip. Take a photo, look at it in Photoshop, and see what changes you want to make before it's completely finished. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round, has an orange arrow going towards it. If you click on that, YouTube probably still won't notify you when new content goes live. So make sure to also click on the bell notification icon. And just remember, I have videos every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.